Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Plutarch's treatise, How a Person Can Be Aware of Progress in Virtue, he's going to give us a really interesting index or sign for the progress that we're making that has to do with emotional responses of a certain sort, but also to the actions they should necessarily lead to. So it's not just about feeling, it's about the characteristic responses that stem from and show the reality of that feeling. So one of these is what we call emulation in English. The Greek for it is zēlos. And from really the time of Aristotle, who talks about this in Rhetoric Book 2, this is regarded as something important, as a sign of good character. And another one of the responses is thaumazein, which we can translate as awe, respect, wonder, right? Admiring is another way to understand it that's perhaps better as a translation for this passage. But when we hear that, for example, philosophy begins in wonder, philosophy begins in thaumazein. So these are two really important features, he's going to say, and they are going to lead to something. So he begins, this is in section 14, he says, furthermore, as has already been said, the translating of our judgments into deeds, into action, right? And not allowing our words to remain mere words is the specific mark of progress. And an indication of this is the desire to emulate what it is that we praise. So to emulate, we usually think of this primarily in terms of action. You do what it is that somebody else is doing. So there's imitation involved. But emulation also involves a feeling. This is the way I ought to behave. It's good for me to act like this person. So if you really praise something, if you say that something is good, you can ask yourself, why aren't you behaving like that? And you might feel a certain sense of pain at not being able to do that. And then eagerness, prothumus, literally like being motivated to do what it is that we admire, what it is that we have thaumazein for, and correlatively not choosing, and the word there is thele, not selecting, being unwilling to do, or even to endure or put up with, tolerate is the translation here, what we criticize. So we've got praising, we've got admiring, we've got blaming or criticizing, and each of these, if we're consistent, if we are actually making progress towards virtue, should be reflective of how we feel and what we do. So he's going to go on and say, it was to be expected. All the Athenians should commend the daring and bravery of Miltiades. But the remark of Themistocles is that the trophy of Miltiades would not suffer him to sleep, but roused him from his slumbers, made it plain all at once he was not merely praising and admiring, but also emulating and imitating as well. So imitation is mimesis. It's doing what somebody else does. And so he says, we're making little progress so long as the admiration we feel for successful people, remains inert, doesn't do anything within ourselves, and doesn't stir us to imitation. If we're making progress in virtue, then when we do admire something, we should behave in that way. So if I say, I love the fact that my colleague is so good at writing books and they put so much work into it, what wonderful books they're writing, you could say, okay, that's cool. Why aren't you writing books, right? Or there's such a good parent. Man, they think about their kids and support them when they need it. Well, what's your parenting like? If you think that that's a good thing, why aren't you actually doing it? Then he's going to make a really interesting comparison. So we got to be a little bit careful with this. He's not endorsing jealousy here, but he is going to bring it up. And the Greek word for jealousy, zēlotupia, is pretty close to the word for admiration, zēlos. But usually we think of jealousy as being related to another word that's going to get brought up, envy, phthaunos. So people often get confused about jealousy and envy. Envy is when you feel a pain that somebody else has something and you want that something and you don't think that, they should have it. You'd like to take it away from them. Jealousy is when you have something, or at least think you have it, and you want other people to keep their hands off. So I am jealous if somebody hits on my wife. I'm envious of the guy who has a beautiful wife over there, right? And then my wife could be like, hey, I'm jealous of that. I don't like that, right? We could go on and on and on. So he's going to say that love, eros, being attracted to somebody, it's not really active without some measure of jealousy in it. So this is romantic love. This is erotic love. We lay a claim to the person who we love. And then he says, nor is the praise of virtue actually ardent and efficacious. It's not strong and it's not effective if it doesn't motivate us. He says, prod and prick us and create in us not envy. Envy would be bad, but rather this desire for emulation over good things that strives for satisfaction. So if I really praise virtue, I think that it's great to be just, I think it's great to be courageous, it's great to be temperate, well then, why shouldn't I be following that course? I should be doing that, not envious of the people who are courageous, but rather emulating them, recognizing that it's a good thing, and I should be trying to do that as best as I can. And he's got this really great line about Alcibiades. So Alcibiades was a screw-up who was very privileged in ancient Greece, loved Socrates, and Alcibiades used to say, must the heart feel such anguish at the philosopher's words that tears will flow? So Alcibiades was not somebody who was doing well, but he wanted to do well. He wanted to be a better guy. Unfortunately, he didn't, right? He should have hung out with Socrates more. So going on, he talks about how we should compare ourselves with good and perfect people, right? If we actually want to be better, then we need to use them as standards. However, if he mentions, if we're going to be imbued with a spirit of contentiousness and envy towards our better, well, then we're not actually becoming virtuous, and we're not even honoring or admiring virtue. So what should it look like? We should actually, become conscious of our own shortcomings, of the fact that we don't fully measure up. And that should bother us, right? He says that, here we go. When we compare ourselves with the deed and conduct of a good and perfect man, we're pricked by the consciousness of our own failings. But that's not the end of the story. There's also a good side to this. He uses 3 different feeling terms here. So rejoicing, we actually feel happy while we're also feeling like, oh man, I don't measure up. We rejoice, we feel happy, chairein in Greek, through hope, the elpida, that is through hoping that we're going to get better, and, yearning, pothon, something that we talked about earlier. The person who yearns for philosophy is on the way to virtue. Now it's about the person who yearns for being a better person. And this generates what gets translated here as something like, a urging, but we could also translate it as impulse. The Greek term is horme, which means impulse towards something. And we should also feel love and affection, or if you like, friendship and love. The two terms there are philein, which means to feel affection and feel love, and agapan. Now, this is interesting because a lot of times people will try to BS you and say, the Greeks had 4 terms for love, and they're all totally different from each other. There's eros, there's philia, there's storge, and there's agape. And agape is this self-giving love that we see in Christianity. Well, that's not really the truth. These are being used, both of them, in Plutarch's writing as the sort of affection that we should feel. And should we feel it just to people? Yes, we should feel it to people, to good people, but we should also feel it towards the disposition, the diathesin, the virtue that those people have. So we're not just loving a person, we're loving what is lovable in them, what is good about them, those people whose deeds we emulate, who we want to be like, right? And so that is another important way in which we can tell, do we actually feel this way? Is this how we approach people? Or do we engage in some sour grapes? Oh, they're not really so good. Do we detract? Do we try to pull them down to our lower level? And he goes on and he says, whenever we begin to so love good people, that we not only love them and the words that come from them, we also feel admiration and affection for other things, for their habit, their schema, their way of being, right? For their way they walk, their gait, for their look, for their smile, for these rather contingent things. We want to be like them again. And then he talks about we even do this with things that we normally consider bad. And he's going to give you some examples. He says that just as lovers fondly welcome even lisping or pallor in their fair ones, so we do not shrink at the thought of the exile of Aristides, the imprisonment of Anaxagoras, or the poverty of Socrates, or the sentence pronounced on Phocion. But because we believe that virtue, even when attended by such afflictions, is worthy of our love, we try to approach close to it, right? So we view them even in misfortune as worth emulating. Not like we should be like, well, Socrates was poor, so I should be poor, and that'll make me good. No, but if we have to be poor, we can look to Socrates or Diogenes or Crates or whoever else as a role model and say, well, they did it. I think I might be able to do it as well. And he says that with people of this type, it's already become a constant practice to set before their eyes good men of the present and the past and to reflect. Now, this has to do with role models. What would Plato have done in this case? What would Lycurgus, how would Lycurgus have conducted himself? Before such mirrors as these, he says, they array themselves or readjust their way of looking and repress some of their more ignoble utterances and resist the onset of some emotion. And that's another way in which we emulate. We try to be like the people who we probably won't measure up to, but at least we can come somewhat close by trying our best to be like what's good in them.